how the mixed breeds help the white man to tell the lie that ancient Kemet,
well, look,
ancient Cometian civilization was white civilization, and the race wars that took place that have created the confusion that we see today.
Okay, hold on. What that means, hold on. Here's something, this is really important. What black people have to start doing is we got to start to tell the truth about ourselves, and it's not going to always make us feel good.
That's right.
Okay? And so everything about ancient Egypt was not, you know, just beautiful and this, that, and the other. We made a lot of mistakes. And the number one mistake that we made, we did take white wives. And because we took white wives, we began to make mixed breeds. And those mixed breeds, if you read Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization, page 295, he's the one who talks about it best. He had the mulatto problem.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
The mulatto problem. These mixed breeds would be created amongst us and how they would be used against us. You follow what I'm saying?
That's right.
And it has not changed. The ones you have to watch out for are the mulattoes. Racially, you're a double agent. You can come amongst me and say anything. Yeah, brother, I'm with you. Yeah, da 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 da. But then you also, in your mind, you know you're not going to deny half of yourself from me. I had a mulatto girlfriend who grew up in this conscious community, came up under Dr. Leonard Jeffries, Dr. John Henry Clark. I ain't gonna name no names, but she said something that blew my mind because I knew her in the movement all of these years. And she said something to me a few months ago that blew me. She had a German father who she never knew and never met. She's a beautiful girl. But she said something that blew me away. We were sitting in my home and she said, well, I can't deny half of myself and who I am. And I'm like, you know what? I'm with you. The people who have to understand that is us. You understand what I'm saying? We have to understand that.
I just have one question, and it's not trolling.
Okay.
But do you accept mulattoes, coloreds, mixed breeds, whatever you want to call them, like the Barack Obamas and what have you? Do you accept those people as black?
Absolutely not. Do we agree or do we disagree with each other?
No, we agree on that. But here's my little anecdote or addition to that. We can still use them for our ends, just like white people did. Meaning we can still quote unquote radicalize and blackenize a mulatto and have them do the dirty work for us.
In the colonial era, a lot of times the white people did use mulattoes as a buffer class. And he's saying, why don't we use them the same way? As if we're not human beings being spoken about here. As if he's talking about moving furniture. Oh, they used to use that couch. We can use it now. They're not using it anymore.
If they can get closer to the enemy than us, and not just that, not only can we use them, we can have them thinking that they are black.
Bam. Bam. Have them thinking that they are black. They are, okay, so what we say about white people is you'll never be white. You have a drop of black in you, they'll never see you as white. That's true. You won't ever be white. But I don't want to be. Most of us don't want to be. But at least at the end of the day, we know it. They know it. We know it. They know we're not white. We know we're not white. This gentleman here said to basically lead us on, make us think we are black. Just to use us for whatever proximity we have to white people, for whatever we can get them that can help their movement. Tell us whatever it takes just to make us, yes, brother, man, I'm on board. Meanwhile, laughing behind our backs, they're not like us. But that's right, brother. Go ahead, do that dirty work. That's crazy.
And pair them up with the darkest person that we have, and then take their offspring and pair that with it, which is what white people do when they use mulattoes. So it's like we can, the mulattoes can be used. You can take a so-called mixed race person with green eyes, and if they identify as, and the classic case is Malcolm X, but it doesn't matter as long as they offsprings, they give us resources, and then we take their offsprings and marry them into an even darker person. And then within 100 years, that so-called white genetics, for the most part, will be wiped out. Is that like a concept that you guys are against, or what are your thoughts on that?
So take them, use them, breed them with a black person, and even their offspring still isn't black enough. We need to, he said, breed them with the darkest black person we have. And then you take their offspring and breed that with the darkest black person they have. And after 100 years, we'll be done got rid of that white blood. So white people are the only ones with this mindset? With the washing out and the getting rid of? No. Anybody can have these crazy mindsets. This man is literally saying part of you is disgusting, will utilize you. That part of you we can use for your proximity to those white people. We're going to use it for what it's good for. And then in the next few generations, we'll just wash it out. Just get rid of it. I'm not saying it. It's coming from the horse's mouth. It ain't me. My hands are up. It's not me.
I'm totally against that. I'm totally for black people getting with other black people. I'm not for whitening out the race. So if
No, that's not.
I think he's misunderstanding him, because the guy did say you breed the mulatto with the blackest person you have, and then you breed that child, which would be, I guess, a griff, and you breed them with the blackest person they have. So he's not trying to whiten the race. Whitening it would be getting a mulatto and then having them have a child with a white person, or the mulattoes only having children with one another. It wouldn't further whiten it, but it wouldn't further blacken it either. But whitening it would have taking that mulatto and having them breed with a white person, and then have that child breed with a white person. Where are you going to get these white people from if this is a black movement? So I see what, like, clearly he's trying to blacken the mulatto's lineage, not whiten it. But I also understand what this guy is saying. He's like, we don't need to do any of that. This is a black movement for black people. I don't want to bring in other people, play with their minds, use them, make them think they're included when they're really not, just to use them. So he's making more sense. Don't use them in that way.
That's not what I mean.
brother, why are you asking me a question, and when I start speaking, you start cutting me off again?
Because you saying that you said whitening the race. That's not what I meant. I
No,
said
but that's what happens when if I get with a mulatto, I'm not procreating with a black person.
Chapter 12, A View from the Bridge. The conflict of viewpoints on the history of the African people develops as issues in the work, and I suppose that at the present level of civilization, such as a conflict should be expected between those who represent the masters of the globe and those who are in rebellion against them as the writers of the history of the people they oppress. Invariably, there is a deeply felt need to present the dominated people as childlike creatures, inferior and by ordinance of nature, and therefore helpless without the permanent rule and guiding hand of the master race. Perhaps the highlights in the history of the blacks, which is all this work claims to be, will be even more clearly understood if I had written backwards, beginning with the present. For one thing, less documentation would be required. For by focusing on predominantly Black South Africa, Rhodesia, and the present-day Sudan, the whole world could see almost at a glance exactly what happened to Black Egypt many centuries ago. The script of the play, Whites Against Blacks, is the same. The eternal drive glorifying white blood is the same, finding direct expression in all Caucasian-controlled social and economic systems. In South Africa, the Dutch offsprings by Black women are classified as coloreds and ranked as a separate ethnic group below the Dutch in social and economic status, but far above the Africans. Pinpoint that. That's an important point. In Egypt, the coloreds gradually became the majority as more and more whites came in and more Blacks moved southward. The name Egyptian was taken over by whites in their northern coloreds as applying to themselves alone. The Blacks who were the original Egyptians were no longer called Egyptians, just as the Blacks in South Africa today are no longer called South Africans. Only the whites are South Africans. Both in Egypt and South Africa, the scheme was to make the mulattoes a separate ethnic group, superior to the Blacks because of Caucasian blood, thus creating mutual hatreds that would make unity difficult, if not impossible. By giving all mulattoes privileges and opportunities denied to Blacks, the scheme worked not only in South Africa and ancient Egypt, but it was successful. It was successful throughout the world and still operates in the 1970s, and it still operates today in 2025. The white man has every reason to proudly view his handiwork in managing people and pronounce it good. In the Sudan, the white Arabs are so successful that the coloreds there consider themselves Arabs, not Africans, and look down contemptuously on the Blacks in the Sudan, in southern Sudan, exactly the same as the Egyptian coloreds regarded this same once all-Black region centuries ago. The picture in the northern Sudan today then is exactly the same as the picture was in northern Ethiopia, after it became predominantly Afro-Asian and Afro-European.
And the picture in the southern Sudan today is the same all-black picture, southern Ethiopia, presented over 2,000 years ago. And just as their ancient forefathers battled then against the Egyptian colors, the blacks in the southern Sudan, at the very hour these lines were being written, were still arrayed in battle against the Arabs, now predominantly colored, and for the same ancient reasons. Does anyone wonder why this all-important white created color factor is skipped over by white historians? If they were scientific in their approach and objective and objective in their methods, they would deal with the mulatto role in black history, even though it was a major source of white power and the white man's most effective agent in helping to destroy black civilizations everywhere they were found. White historians would really grow in stature if they themselves wrote the story, wrote it as it was. That would never happen, of course, for they would be recording how the increased number of colors after each white invasion made it easy to credit them with all the great advances the blacks themselves had made. They, the white writers, would be telling how these half-blacks came to be classified as Caucasoids and how helpful this was in obliterating Black Egypt from the pages of history. By this master stroke, through their own sexual creations, they were able to erase the blacks as the first builders of a great civilization and deliberately rob them of that honor. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Happy Monday. Welcome back to On the Shoulders of Giants. I am Joseph Ward. Continuing my reading of Chancellor Williams' book, The Destruction of Black Civilization. This is chapter 12, A View from the Bridge, the summing up. And so, as you can see in the clips and what I've read so far, we are looking at the role, we're taking a closer look rather, at the role of the mulatto or the mixed race person in African history and how the mulatto or a mixed race person played in the building up or the destruction of these African civilizations, these African empires, or even African people and movements that they've had. In the first clip, the gentleman was talking about how mulattoes are always used to represent Black people. They're always or often being put in positions of leadership, and they look Black but work white. One thing I think need to be fixed, what he's saying. Yes, Chancellor Williams did talk about some of the blacks mating with the whites, mating with the Asians, mating with the Arabs, mating with the Europeans. But for the most part, the greatest problem that the blacks had was the individualism, the lack of unity, right? And that lack of unity, that individualism left us vulnerable to be invaded and attacked. And when you're left to be vulnerable, when you're left vulnerable, you are invaded and you are attacked. And the women were vulnerable. And so the women became a part of a lot of harems. Remember, we read that at least 2 videos ago about how a lot of the African women became a part of the harems. So yes, some African men did marry and have children with the Asians, the Europeans, the Arabs, but for the most part, the women were taken as booty or prisoners of war, or spoils of war, rather. They're taken as spoils of war and added to harems or used as sexual objects, even married. All the various ways that women become spoils of war. So I do want to make that point, but also to the point in the second video, what they were talking about, I don't believe our mission is to use mulattoes as like secret agents, to go against the whites. I believe from what my understanding, and I could be wrong, from what Chancellor Williams has pointed out, because a lot of this is based off of what we're reading from Chancellor Williams's book. But from my understanding, the object is to, if you are a mixed race person and you are not down with us, then we're not down with you and we're not messing with you. But if you are a mixed race person and you down with us, then we're going to ride with you. And you will have proven through your deliberate actions and your overall actions that you are, and your continuous actions that you are down with us. And so that was my understanding, that we're not here to use anybody, but to rock with those who rock with us. That's my understanding. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Get in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong. Speaking of that, make sure you like this video, comment, subscribe, share this video. I thank you all for the love that you showed my On the Shoulders of Giants students. I appreciate all the love that y'all showed my students. That really means a lot. That means a lot to me and a lot to them. They were so excited to make the video and to share the video and to get it out. And the love that people have showed them, I appreciate. So I just want to give a shout out to my patrons, man. Real quick, Brother Eldridge McLean, Crystal J, and William Kane. I want to give a shout out to you all. Thank you all for you all continued support. You know, your support goes to the On the Shoulders of Giants School. And I want to continue showing you the different things that we are doing in this school. Hey, we starting with what we got, but we're making a big impact no matter what. And I want to give another shout out to me, Kim, for your continuous support. Thank you for all that you do for On the Shoulders of Giants. It really means a lot. Make sure I'm giving everybody their shout outs before I get back into it. Who else? Come on. Making sure. Yeah, okay, yep. Me, Kim, thank you. And who else? Yeah, that's all I can see here. So thank you everybody who continues to support. Thank you. And if you want to support, you know, the information is in the description if you want to support, and you can see it scrolling on the bottom of the screen. So let's get back into it. We're picking back up on page 313, where it says the long drawn out process. The long drawn out process by which all this was accomplished has been detailed in this work. It had to be dealt with along with other factors and forces because the inferior status of Black people throughout the world today tends to conform to the white man's doctrine that they are inferior. In fact, his whole system universally applied was designed to make them inferior and keep them so. Who then in the 20th century would believe that these same Blacks were the race that had built great cities, developed writing, the arts and sciences, when the whites of Europe were still roaming tribes of barbarian warriors? This being a well-known, though not publicized fact of history, how then explain the descent of the Blacks from the heights reached by their forefathers to the depths in which they are, for the depths in which they find themselves today? This was the central question in all of our research. Most of the important answers are given in preceding chapters. Further research, especially field research, will reveal an even more amazing story. A study of the general history of mankind reveals no people who have suffered so much in every area of life and survived. One thinks immediately of the Jews and the systematic oppression they encountered in every land, but they were not enslaved, not since the days when whites were generally enslaved everywhere, and slavery had nothing to do with race. We have seen that after the murderous revolt of the white slaves of the 13th century, white slavery ended, and thereafter the concentration was on Blacks alone. The Jews, being white and tenaciously clinging to their own heritage, were able to find escape routes not open to Blacks anywhere: business, finance, and science. They were free to study, and study they did, surpassing almost all other peoples in resulting intellectual supremacy. Learning became a second religion. They had seen that two of the certain ways to overcome their oppressors were the mastery of wealth and intellectual excellence. They therefore became moneylenders to emperors, kings, and popes. Meanwhile, the Blacks were still being hunted down and enslaved. When freed, they were kept as close to the status of slaves as such efforts could achieve. Yet today, we're just beginning to learn about the heights from which they were driven. One of the highly important things this study revealed was how the very color of Black came to mean slave, and therefore equated with bad luck, inferiority, and shame. We have dared to go beyond the limits and the guidelines set for us by the czars of history and geography to discover that ancient Ethiopia covered North Africa to the Mediterranean Sea, that Egypt was the northeastern division of that empire, and that even as late as 3100 BC, when white Asians held Lower Egypt, Ethiopians still held most of their homeland in Upper Egypt. In short, almost all of Egypt was Black as late as 3100 BC. I say as late as 3100 BC to emphasize the fact again that all this is well known to white historians concerned with Africa. They know because when the earliest Greek and Roman writers studied in the land, Egypt was still Black Egypt. They knew what history was. They knew what the history was. They left the records. Even when Herodotus arrived, Black civilization was known to be so ancient that its beginnings was lost in a distant past beyond memory. But when he arrived, he found a very mixed Ethiopian population of whites, browns, yellows, and blacks. The first three groups now drawing a line between themselves as Egyptians while giving the blacks the lowest class status along with their original name of Ethiopians. There may have been some justice in this sense. Herodotus was in Egypt. The masses of non-integrating blacks had themselves rejected both Egypt and the Egyptians' names as the Asians and Afro-Asians became the majority, and they had concentrated below a new borderline as Ethiopians in the Ethiopian Empire had no longer included Egypt. And so if we're going to talk history, we're going to have to talk history and be real about it, right? So we do have to look at the role that mulattoes did play in the destruction and oppression of Black people, whether it was in ancient times or now, because we've talked about it from ancient times to now. The role that the mulatto has played, especially the mulattoes who have chosen the sides of the oppressors, whether the oppressor was their father or their mother, but most likely we've been talking about when the oppressor was their father, right? So nowadays we call it the colorism issue, right? Blacks in America, or fair-skinned Black people, or even mixed Black people in America, they're treated different. Now, whether or not all of them are able to take advantage of that privilege remains to be seen. But the closer a Black person looks to be white, seems like the more privilege they get, or more privilege that they are privy to, or more privilege is available to them, rather, right? But that was reinforced, and we can say reinforced through and we can put our quotes up, reinforced through the Willie Lynch letter, right? But that was reinforced through slavery, pitting Black people against each other in every imaginable way possible, right? But one of the main ones was the light skin versus the dark skin. So, but what we're learning now, there's always been a tension between light skin and dark skin, just as well as there's always been tension between African and African. It was just exploited further. And of course, if you're the oppressive race, you create your own agents, of course. And so it's for us to be able to learn from history, learn how to be able to read people better and choose better allies and choose who we allow to the cookout better, rather than just because they made us feel good. What fruit does the tree bear? The most important fact here is that the Greeks were the first Europeans to know the most advanced civilization of the ancient world was in Africa. The first Europeans to study and to be directly influenced by it and to proclaim it to the world boldly and without reservation. Indeed, it is from Greek history, including their myths and legends, that we get some of the best insights into the early history of the Blacks. They drew upon the land of the Blacks for architectural designs, city planning, sculpture, science, and even religion. These they reshaped and made Greek. The Greeks were the best traveling students in the world. In their relations with Africa, they exemplified, as no other people had, the eclectic process of civilization and progress. The readiness to borrow from their other peoples to the best of their culture, to be reshaped and made over to suit one's own ideals and needs. Having lost most of our own written records through both destruction, endless displacement, and the gradual loss of African scribes, the Black world owes the debt of everlasting thanks to those early Greeks and Roman writers, but mostly Greek, who included much of our ancient history with their own and passed it down through the centuries. We salute them. And this was before racism existed. Now, this is not before white domination existed or Greek domination at the time, but this is before racism existed, when they excluded you because of how you look, not just because you were their foes or they had conquered you, but because you were conquered in their foe and oppressed because of your color now. The invaders raiding into the continent from Asia and Europe formed the second centuries-long battlefronts against which the blacks had to fight for survival. These wars spanned several thousand years, and in an earlier chapter, I wondered out loud and still wonder how many people weakened by perpetual hunger and disease could possibly carry on wars of resistance to the white invaders for over 5,000 years. This they did, and this their descendants must know and remember with pride. The black resistance to white domination covered over 5,000 years. When the enslavers pressed in upon them from the north, from the east, from the south, and from the west, they continued to fight. The resistance to slavery continued while the continent was being depopulated by it with the active participation of many black chiefs and kings seeking wealth and the white man's promise of security from all of their black foes. The third battle lines for survival were therefore internal and points up one of the main contributions they made towards their domination by other peoples. As time went on, they became preoccupied with warring against each other, that they seemed to regard the whites as friends by comparison. I'm going to read that again. As time went on, they became preoccupied with warring against each other, that they seem to regard the whites as friends by comparison. So you think just because you're not warring just like now, because we're killing ourselves more and we are more at each other's throat, that the white man is our friend. That's what we think now. This seeming contradiction is baffling, for while there's nothing new about a people fighting amongst themselves, they generally stop if outsiders attack, forget their differences, and join united ranks against the common foes. Black people, wake up. Message: Caucasians will wage frightful wars against other Caucasians, but will quickly unite as though by instinct against non-whites, not only in wars, but international policies. They have developed a kind of built-in solidarity in their relations with non-Caucasian people. This fact, as much as anything else, helped to explain their position as masters of the world. On the other hand, and in glaring contrast, this unity and non-cooperation have been characteristic of black societies. And this fact, more than anything else, helps in understanding not only of why the blacks eventually lost their battles against the whites, but also why even today they are still unable to deal with the white world. This situation of antagonism, self-hatred, and attending disunity in the race is a matter of such grave concern that I have returned to it again and again throughout these discussions. The only reason for dealing with the role played by the mulattoes in Black history, for example, is to show how baffling and complex the problem is. For they were used not only to help disguise the most significant achievements of blacks, but they were also effectively used to further enhance and perpetuate the already existing conflicts and divisions among them. Now, they had just as much right to be classified as white as they did to be classified as black, but they found it expedient to operate in both worlds, exploiting the blacks while serving the interests of the whites. And that's where the gentlemen were getting to in that second video. There could never be any clear-cut judgment or defense against internal subdivision along any color line, because in almost every black society, it was possible to find some mulattoes who were as loyal to the race as anyone could be, and some blackest of the black who might be paid agents of Arabs or Europeans, right? So you have to judge people by their merits, not by who their parents are, right? The state of Black Africa then was a state of perpetual fears, fears of being hunted down and attacked from without, fears of betrayals by unknown followers from within, fears of attacks by other migrating blacks who are themselves fleeing from danger, fears of hunger, ever-mounting disease, and of the alarming number of deaths that could never become common no matter how often they occurred. Fears of all kind, another source of mutual suspicions and distrust. Centuries of this and the amazing outcome. The blacks became their own worst enemies and therefore increasingly a helpless people, because we don't know if we can trust ourselves because of how we treat ourselves. And especially now, our proximity and our fondness to white people. We don't know if we can trust ourselves, but we find so many ways to trust the white man. In none of this are we dealing with the merely unusual misfortunes, which are occasionally visited upon almost every people. No, we're dealing here with the unusual, something quite different in the general experience of mankind. For we are reviewing here a permanent situation, which, in combination with the forces outlined in foregoing pages, destroyed the civilization of an entire race, checked progress, and forced countless thousands into barbarism. These were the people who sought freedom and security in the forests, swamps, and caves. Some unable to advance under these conditions, nevertheless battled against sinking in the level of savages. Some rebuilt their states even in the vast forest, and still others, famine crazed, became savages or semi-barbarians. Many of the groups that descended to this lower state of existence were isolated in areas where starving times was not a period of months, but years. And we're talking about, he basically is getting that everybody didn't have a chance to become a part of a society. Everybody, all groups of people didn't join other groups and build new societies and new empires and new kingdoms. Some people were left on the outside, left to starve and fend for themselves. So some degenerated to barbarism and some just didn't make it. The worst outcome from the forced migrations all over Africa and the long search for places of refuge and freedom were the endless splintering off of societies into countless little isolated states. Overall, it is difficult to see how it could have been otherwise. They had to split up. Unity in terms of keeping a very large group together was impossible. Seldom could 10,000 people move en masse, not to mention 100,000. And 100,000 would be a small number if it was a great state that was being disorganized or destroyed. If they were being attacked by invaders, not only expediency, but life itself dictated that they split up into small groups, each under an elected leader. In this way, both the chances of escape from the enemy and of finding food and water somewhere were better than would be the case if they moved in one vast body. Some of these separated groups did indeed meet again by chance before they had become total strangers to each other. These often settled in the same region and near enough to each other to maintain some languages. Others met again generations after the original segmentations, met as strangers speaking in different tongues and with different patterns of cultures. Strangers, yet all descendants from the same society. Worse still, the blacks have been so busy being different through all the years that they have been unable to see the underlying of all cultural varieties is the compelling evidence that they are all members of the same race and have the same common origin. But that's what being disorganized, disunited would do to you because of the invasions and the forced migrations, right? Splitting people up, weakening people. A view from the bridge. What then is the view from the bridge? The outlook is grim. For the black people of the world, there is no bright tomorrow. The blacks may continue to live in that dream world of singing, dancing, marching, praying, and hoping because of the deluding signs of what looks like victories, still trusting in the ultimate justice of the white man. But 1,000 years hence, their descendants will be substantially where the race was 1,000 years before. For the white people, still masters of the world, do not have to yield. They have never changed their real attitude toward black people during all the passing centuries, and there is absolutely nothing upon which to base the belief that they will change in the centuries to come. Concessions on some demands, yes. Expediency dictates nothing. Nothing that the black masses accept as leaders. Any and all Negroes who hold important positions, the whites who control these positions directly or indirectly, actually determine who the leaders of blacks shall be as independent black organizations emerge. The dangling attractions of government and foundation grants are there to quiet the outspoken but money-hungry leaders. Indeed, some of these leaders were quick in discovering that the most certain route to handsome grant or loan is pretended outrage and shouting militancy. The whites know this all too well. They were quite willing to pour millions of dollars into all kinds of black community projects precisely because they know that these phony leaders will do nothing that will really improve the conditions under which the black masses live. Blacks are still hopelessly naive if they do not yet understand that the whites never did and do not now intend to include blacks in the doctrine of human equality, equal justice, or anything else that means real equality. The white determination to keep blacks in an inferior position is so deep that they will battle against the enhancement of civil rights laws, even when they know there will be no real enforcement. The opposition is to the very idea of equality, right? By any means necessary to keep black people down, even using sellout leaders, whether those leaders are mixed race or those leaders are all the way black, using the sellout leaders to misguide, misdirect, to keep people docile, to quell outrage, all those things, while the leaders are getting their pockets lined. That's happening right now for Black America. That's happening right now. False leaders or appointed leaders by the Democrats or appointed leaders by the Republicans, misleading black people, selling out black people, getting black people all emotionally riled up for nothing, not bringing no real outcome while their pockets are being lined. This is happening right now. So those Negroes who are frantically fighting to escape from the African race by way of integration and amalgamation will continue to meet everlasting and universal opposition from the whites. The Negro drive to be with the whites in every situation is equaled by the white determination to prevent it. Yet the whites must truly feel a deep sense of pride in seeing the Negro leadership so clearly validating their own belief in white superiority. Their pretended quality education objective actually collapses under the wheels of buses for racial balance. They are proclaiming to all the world that regardless of general desegregation in any all black or predominantly black population, the blacks themselves are utterly incapable of achieving or maintaining high standards of excellence in education or indeed anything else. Here we have within the race the intolerable situation of the anti-black group proclaiming one's race inherent inferiority more effectively than the whites ever could, precisely because this group is regarded as black. Furthermore, and even greater importance, the amalgamist Negroes generally hold most of the administrative and key teaching positions in the educational system. Through sheer indifference, therefore, they can block the development of the quality education in black schools while at the same time sending their own children to white private schools. Their remaining interest in the black schools is the money derived from their supervisory and teaching positions. So, talking about, once again, those Negroes, uppity Negroes, the upper crust Negroes who they are black, but they operate under a different modality, under different code of conduct, under different viewpoint, under different way of life, right? It is to serve the white man in blackface. It is to make sure that those who oppose the white man get taught a lesson. To make sure that there's a clear separation. And there's a clear separation between those blacks and regular blacks. Meritorious manumission. Yeah. Now, remember, these people are mixed race, or the mulattoes, and these people are regular old Negroes. But now we're gonna jump back into how the mixed race, the mulattoes, or the coloreds were continuously used to denigrate the blacks, right? Furthermore, white America has found that their purposes were served best by classifying the Negro, all persons without any amount of African blood, no matter how small. This obvious injustice has never been openly challenged even by those directly affected and bitterly resent being classified so. But the United States refused to follow either the South African system of making the Afro-Dutch offsprings a separate ethnic group by law and calling them colors, or the ancient practice of the Egypt and the Arab world of classifying mixed breeds as white. This fact has had a tremendous impact on the integrationalist Negroes in the United States, leading many to identify with the Arab world rather than Africa, and even to adopt Arabic names rather than African names. In fact, because of their powerful hold on Africa through the religion of Islam and the vast colored population in many Arab states, many white Arabs will publicly state for African ears that they are a non-white people. However, even if the United States did attempt to reclassify this group as either white or colored, which I agree with what he's about to say, the millions who are bound to the African race by unthinkable ties of love would fight such a move till its death. These have no desire to be either white or colored. For like the late Congressman Adam Clayton Powell, who could have passed for white anywhere in the world, they would say, "Call me black," knowing full well that black refers to not only anyone's color, for which none is responsible, but black defines one's attitude toward the homeland of his ancestors, which from times immemorial was called the land of the blacks. So something different developed in Black America. For whereas in most other parts of the world, the mulattoes form an elite caste, this is true only of certain groups in the United States, such as the Wetzos of Maryland and Virginia, also known by other names, and their spillover in Washington, D.C. In general, the divided loyalty split them as anti-African and pro-African, which is the way it has always been. The view from the bridge thus far has been a refocus on the futility of our continuing and childlike faith in the white man's justice, the belief that our protest, marching, demonstrations, singing, and praying will change his 6,000 years of hostility to us, and that the Negroes who frantically battle for admission to white suburbia and to its private clubs, golf clubs, swimming pools, etc., will never be welcome, even though they may be near white in color. The final focal point in this concentration is that the masses, from the blackest of the blacks to the lightest of the lights, do not care at all about socially mixing with the whites. They, the whites, on their part, have no reason or inclination to do more than make token concessions from time to time, thus quieting noisy leaders, but never changing the inferior situation of the masses. They still own and control the wealth of Africa, directly and indirectly. And from it, along with that from other areas of the world, they have developed technologies and the world commerce, all fully protected by governments also under their control, that assure them of continued white supremacy. This phenomenal success is questionable position of strength derived from their conquest of other peoples and their wealth has led them to believe that they are, as a matter of fact, the superior people and therefore the rightful rulers of this planet. Why then should they be expected to yield? Human rights, equal justice. What are these but neurotic slogans for the masses, even the white masses, which are quickly conceded as ideas and principles everywhere? The masses of poor whites also live on these slogans and ideas of equal justice. They are a pitiful people, often half-starved themselves, yet living and having their being in the happy thought that they are members of the white conquering race and that the once enslaved blacks among them are living evidence of their own superiority. They enjoy the glory reflected from the domination and power achieved by the ruling minority of their race. Too ignorant to realize that they are used as the tools of hate to support the wealth and power concentrated in relatively few hands. When these poor whites secure the kind of jobs that move them up in the glory land called middle class, they get the most concrete evidence in their innate superiority. They find that the economic system is so structured that one, to secure better jobs and advancement, the number one qualification is to be white. Two, that everywhere only a token number of non-whites are employed, they may be required to have college degrees and sometimes the masters, while the higher salaried whites, including supervisors, may not have a high school education. They are not merely these are not merely and may not theories. In the United States, the official statistics show that none show that nationwide black college graduates not only earn $1,040 a year less than white high school graduates, but they earn less than a white 10th grader. The white college graduate averages $3,095 more than the black college graduate. 3, blacks must pay more to live than whites. The lower wages they receive and the higher prices they must pay are built-in guarantees that they will always occupy an inferior place in society. Merchants now generally have 2 prices for the same goods, one black and one white. With the uneducated blacks, they're having a field day. They are equally successful in robbing the educated black middle class because of its abiding faith and status-driven complex. These are the Negroes who readily pay $225 a month for a house just vacated by whites who rented it for only $125, and Negroes who buy $25,000 home listed to whites for from $5,000 to $10,000 less, provided, of course, that white folks previously lived there. And the inner city food markets charge higher prices for cheaper brands of canned goods and equally high prices for leftovers from their first-class stores in surrounding white suburbia. And 4, the insurance companies face this economic war on the blacks boldly and accurately. They simply charge black more for less benefits. Blacks must pay higher premiums than whites for life insurance, for example, because it has been determined that their life expectancy is 10 years less than that of the whites. For the insurance industry, it is strictly a matter of business. They know that the total economic system is so structured against the black that it is impossible for them to maintain proper health standards. Being black, they must die first by 10 years. This brings us to the main reason for the focus on America. It quickly assumed the role of the whole white West as the various powers were forced from their imperial rule in Asia and Africa, forced, that is to say, from direct political rule or political functions of colonialism. The world at large, in the greatest misconception of modern times, took this to mean African independence at last, African freedom, and the end of European colonialism. The plain truth is that the African states today are not even half free and independent, for colonialism was from the beginning exactly what it is today, an economic system for the control and exploitation of the wealth of other peoples. It was and is a private enterprise system. Colonial governments was initially company government. When the political task got too big because of the increasing rivalries between the great powers, the mother countries would appoint colonial governors and other administrators. In other words, government by the home country came in as a protecting umbrella for the main objective, economic exploitation. The economic control still prevails all over Africa. It is not neocolonialism, but the old colonialism itself still carrying on under the beautiful and high-flying flags of independent African nations. The various mineral resources are so vast and involve so many billions of dollars that individual Africans called upon to decide whom they will serve, their people or the masters of the country's wealth, often decide to serve the latter. The fact that Africa is still in economic bondage to her former political masters brings us back to our point of departure. As the more political colonialism disappeared, the United States rushed to fill the breach to take up the banner as the leader of the free world, the Atlantic or Western powers, and hold the line of white supremacy throughout the world. The American military bases scattered all over the world have meaning far beyond the supposed communist threat. Rich European nations no longer needed to maintain their usual armies for defense, for their great white brother, Uncle Sam, would gladly draft men to keep American forces there. American armed might is everywhere, ready to rush in to play the self-assigned role. This new world mission of the United States replaces, as far as it can, the more direct rule of the Western powers over the non-white peoples. The threat to Black Africa and Black people everywhere should be obvious. From the very beginning, for example, the American secret policy was to give little or no assistance to Africa. Outright grants such as the billions poured into Europe were never expected by the Black nations. The Africans had sense enough to know that such free gifts were only for whites, but they did expect to secure loans on reasonable terms of repayment. The American attitude on loans to African states turned out to be about the same as it would have been if they had been begging for free grants. There was a very definite African policy, however. The policy was not to announce the policy. There was a public announcement of what was intended as a policy early in the 1960s. It said to Africa, in effect, that the United States would continue its friendly interest and, as always, said little or nothing in the matter of loans. Other friendly advice included the well-known information that they could apply to the World Bank. The big American air and military base in Ethiopia made it a favorite African state like Libya. American investments in 2 other African states enabled them to secure loans. Black nations that might overcome the foreign economic stranglehold within their countries by increased production and exports for foreign exchange find their export trade blocked by the tariff walls of the same United States and the same European powers whose industrial machines would be crippled without the wealth, mineral resources, and basic strategic minerals they still control and ship out of Africa. In the world, the blacks neither own nor control the wealth of their own land, supposedly free again. They are unable to rebuild even as well as their migrating forefathers did before the Arab and European conquest. As shown in previous chapters, freed of the white man's control, a control from which most of them were fleeing, they were overriding all obstacles and successfully building and rebuilding new states until they were finally overtaken in the 19th and as late as the beginning of the 20th centuries. The overall view from the bridge then is simply the view of where and how the black people of the world stand today after a summary review of the last 6,000 years of their history. And whether the focus is on Africa, the Caribbean, the Americans, or elsewhere, they are now seen standing at the crossroads of history, and they are confused. And we're confused because we're not learning from our history. That's why this book is important, and all books who point out the truth are important, because we're not learning from our history. We're continuing to repeat the same things. We know that crumbs come from the white man's table, and we continue to reach for the crumbs. We continue to look to be in favor of the white man. We continue to build with the white man and for the white man. Everything is for the white man and nothing is for ourselves. So we're left vulnerable. We're left destitute. We're left on the outside looking in. We're left begging. And we want somebody to come save us while refusing to save ourselves and refusing to learn from history. Refusing to see that your enemy has no obligation to uplift you. Relating or having relations or building families with your opposition, with your oppressor, would not cause your oppressor to love you anymore or hate you any less. Just because you play football, just because you integrate into the white systems, just because you're close to white people, doesn't mean that they have any type of love for you. That could increase their disdain for you. So we got to learn, like Dr. Clark told us, no, we're our own enemies. We're our own friends. If you need a friend, look in the mirror. We're our own friends. So stop looking for the enemy to save us. Stop looking for the enemy to empower us. Stop looking for the enemy to have any kind of compassion and say, oh, well, we tired of doing them wrong, so let's do it right. But also understand the tactics of the enemies. Yes, they use their children against us. They use the children that they make with us against us. They do. They have always, and they will continue to, because it works. And black people are going to continue to fall for it. We continue to say all skin ain't kin, but we continue to fall to the skin. Because, like he said, we are left confused. Yeah. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Destruction of the black civilization. Let's reconstruct our minds so we can stop destroying ourselves internally and externally. Let's learn, and apply. Build ourselves up, become the greatest versions of ourselves, work together, build together, become a mighty group of people so we can do something different and start complaining about what the white man is doing for us. Thank you all for your support. Once again, like, comment, subscribe, share. Catch the next video coming up. I love y'all.